The first time I saw my family again wasn't at a funeral or a wedding or even some orchestrated reunion. It was under the shimmering streetlights of Palm Beach, with the Atlantic wind pressing against my gown and 9 black limousines lining the entrance like a silent procession. They didn't know I was coming. They didn't expect a thing from the daughter they'd erased 13 years ago. I watched their faces freeze, every smile tightening, every glass half lifted, and for one suspended second, the world reversed. I wasn't the girl standing on that driveway begging them not to lock the door. I wasn't the disgrace whispered about in Savannah drawing rooms. I wasn't the daughter Warren Hale declared no longer part of this family. I was something else entirely. And the shock in their eyes was the first confirmation that they finally saw me, not the failure they created, but the woman they never imagined I'd become. I used to think revenge needed fire confrontation grand moments. But sometimes the most devastating blow is simply showing up alive, unbroken, and walking beside people who weren't supposed to recognize your worth. Long before the limousines, before the lights, before Palm Beach, I'd believed disappearing was the only way to survive. Leaving Savannah felt like ripping out a root, painful, necessary, and too final. For years I carried that root in silence, trying to grow something from nothing. But even trees cut down grow back if the foundation is strong enough. I didn't know that yet. I only knew I had to leave. 13 years earlier, I stood outside a small motel along Jacksonville Beach, with 2 suitcases, a box of clothes I couldn't afford, and a head full of questions about whether I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The night smelled of salt and engine fumes, and my breath fogged in the fading coastal air. I wasn't running away, I told myself that over and over. But the truth is, no one leaves home that young, unless staying hurts worse. Ocean Crest Inn was the kind of place that pretended to be cheerful, sun-faded paint, fake palms, a blue neon sign that flickered like it was giving up every few seconds. The lobby was tiny, with a cracked counter and a dusty bowl of peppermints that tasted like sadness. It was also the only place that hired me without questions, background checks, or references I didn't have. I slept in room 12, the one with the flickering bathroom light and carpet that smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how many times I scrubbed it. The first night there, I pressed my forehead to the window, staring at the dark stretches of sand below. The Atlantic crashed rhythmically like it was trying to speak a language I'd forgotten. Something inside me loosened. For the first time in years, the silence around me wasn't a weapon. It was a beginning. Mornings at Ocean Crest Inn were always the same, the hum of the ancient coffee machine, the squeak of the front door, the low click of the computer trying to load a reservation page. On my second morning, as I stood behind the front desk smoothing my uniform shirt, a knock echoed through the lobby. A woman stepped in mid-50s, elegant creme suit, silver hair in a neat twist. She didn't carry luggage. People like her didn't. Her presence filled the room so fully that I straightened instinctively. "Good morning," she said, her voice low and warm, like she'd spoken to 1,000 people and never once raised her tone. "Welcome to Ocean Crest Inn," I replied, trying to sound composed even though my throat tightened from nerves. She studied me for a moment, not rudely, just intentionally, as though she wasn't looking at my uniform or my name tag, but at the way I held myself together. "You handled those guests well yesterday," she said quietly. "The couple from Ohio." I blinked. I hadn't realized she'd been watching. "Yes," I murmured. "They were having a long day." "You diffused it without apologizing for existing," she added. "That's rare." Heat rose to my face, though I wasn't sure if it was pride or embarrassment. "I just try to help where I can." She tilted her head, studying me with something close to curiosity. Then she reached into her bag and handed me a card, black embossed with gold lettering. Serena Dalton, Dalton Development and Hospitality Ventures. "When you're ready to do more than survive," she said, "call me." I stared at the card long after she left, feeling like she'd dropped a match into a dark room. That night, I placed it on the bedside table beside my fraying journal, tracing the letters with my thumb. I wasn't ready. Not then. But those words followed me around Ocean Crest Inn for weeks. Ready to do more than survive. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. I only knew that I had been surviving for so long, I'd forgotten there were other ways to live. One morning, several weeks later, after a night shift full of late check-ins and a pipe leak that soaked half the hallway carpet, I sat on the curb outside the inn with a cup of burnt coffee. The sun rose slowly, spilling gold over the motel sign. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, staring at Serena Dalton's name. The card was soft at the edges from how much I'd handled it. Maybe it was exhaustion, or desperation, or something inside me finally cracking open. But before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed her number. "Miss Hale," she answered immediately, her tone calm, almost as if she'd been waiting. I wondered how long it would take. I swallowed. "How did you," she cut in gently, "come to Cape Coral this afternoon, 4 o'clock, bring nothing but honesty?" The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, coffee cooling between my palms, the sea breeze lifting strands of my hair. No one had ever spoken to me like that, with certainty, with expectation, like I had something worth showing. It scared me. It thrilled me. It made my pulse hammer in a way that felt both dangerous and alive. I stood up, dusted off my uniform, and went inside to ask for the afternoon off. The manager barely looked up from his crossword puzzle when he granted it. He had no idea that giving me those hours would shift the entire course of my life. By noon, I was on the road, duffel bag in the back seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel as I drove south toward Cape Coral. The highway stretched ahead of me, winding through marshes and low bridges over sparkling water. Somewhere between Jacksonville and Cape Coral, the weight of the past 13 years began to slip, not fully, not cleanly, but enough for me to breathe differently. I didn't know what Serena wanted. I didn't know why she saw something in me. I didn't even know what I could offer. All I knew was that I'd been invisible for too long, and for the first time someone looked at me like I could be more than a runaway daughter from a powerful family. The closer I got to Cape Coral, the more the road shimmered with heat, the sky widening into an impossible blue. The GPS instructed me down a quiet street lined with palms. At the end of the road was a villa, the color of warm sand sunlight, spilling across its windows like it belonged to someone who never feared being seen. I parked, took a breath, and stepped out. I didn't realize then that this was the doorway to everything that would lead me to that night in Palm Beach, those limousines, that spotlight, those frozen smiles. All I knew was that I was walking toward a woman who would help me rebuild the life my family tried to erase. And for the first time in 13 years, I felt the faintest spark of something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The villa smelled faintly of citrus and sea air, the kind of scent that made you feel like someone had opened all the windows to let the world in. I stood at the threshold for a full 5 seconds before raising my hand and knocking gently on the polished wood door. It swung open almost instantly. Serena Dalton filled the doorway, poised, serene, composed in a way that made her name feel like destiny rather than coincidence. She wore a simple linen blouse, sleeves, rolled hair, tied back as though she'd been working, not entertaining. There was no grandeur, no air of superiority. Just focus. "You're on time," she said, stepping back so I could enter. "I left early," I replied, unsure what else to say. "I expected you to." Her calm certainty made something tight in my chest flutter uncomfortably. I stepped inside, absorbing the quiet elegance of the villa. It wasn't the kind of wealth that shouted. It was the kind that whispered, because it didn't need to impress anyone. Soft, sand-colored walls, shelves lined with books on leadership and design, small framed photos of places, mountains, coastlines, bustling city corners taken by someone who traveled with intention. "Sit," Serena said, motioning toward a chair near a low glass table. "Tea, coffee, water is fine," I murmured. She studied me again the way she had at the motel, measuring something beneath the surface. I felt exposed, like she could see the girl who walked out of Savannah with nothing but fear and stubbornness. Serena handed me a glass of water and took the chair opposite mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I felt her watching, waiting, letting silence stretch until I had to fill it. "You asked me to come," I said quietly, "but I don't know what it is you want." She smiled slightly. "Honesty, that's all." My hands tightened around the cool glass. "I'm not sure what you mean." Serena leaned forward just a bit, elbows resting lightly on her knees. "What are you afraid of most?" Sutton. I blinked. I'm not." "Yes, you are," she interrupted softly. "Everyone who leaves home that young is afraid of something that chased them out." For a heartbeat, the room blurred. The memory rose without permission, the sharp sound of a chair scraping across the dining room floor, my father's cold voice declaring I was no longer welcome under his roof. I swallowed. "I'm afraid that maybe my father was right about me," I whispered. "That maybe I am everything he said I was." "And what was that?" Serena asked, voice steady. "A disgrace," I said. The word landed heavy on the table between us. Serena didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She didn't gasp. She simply absorbed it like someone who had once carried a similar word in the pocket of her own past. "Men like Warren Hale," she said quietly, "often build their empires by convincing the women around them that they're small." I stiffened. No one outside Savannah ever spoke my father's name with that kind of clarity. "How do you know my father?" I asked, voice tight. Her eyes flickered just once with something old and buried. "We crossed paths," she said. "A long time ago." She stood, walked to a bookshelf, and ran her fingers over the spines as if grounding herself. "He underestimated me once. It cost him a deal that could have doubled his global footprint." I stared at her. "You worked with him for a season." She turned back to me. "Long enough to understand the way he treats people who don't fit inside his version of success." Pieces clicked together in my mind, subtle but undeniable. This wasn't just coincidence. Serena knew exactly what being a Hale meant, and she knew exactly why I'd run. Before I could ask anything more, she moved toward her desk and retrieved a folder bound in dark leather. "I didn't bring you here to discuss your father," she said. "I brought you here because I've seen how you work. I've seen how you handle chaos with grace, how you hold yourself without apologizing for taking up space. That's leadership, and leadership is teachable." She placed the folder on the table in front of me. "I have a project," she said, "one I've been building for years, but it needs someone who can make people feel at home simply by walking into the room. Someone who understands what it means to lose everything and rebuild from scratch. Someone like you." My fingers hesitated before touching the folder. "What kind of projects?" "Small-scale sustainable wellness retreats," she said. "Places that don't look like luxury from the outside, but feel like healing on the inside." I flipped the folder open. Sketches, budget breakdowns, proposed locations. The pages glowed with possibility. "I want you to run it," Serena said simply. My head snapped up. "Run it. You'll oversee operations, manage design implementation, hire your own staff. I'll invest the capital." "How much?" I asked, my voice unsteady. $300,000 to start. $300,000. My throat tightened. "Why me?" "Because you didn't collapse when life tried to shatter you," she said. "You adapted. You kept your dignity. And dignity is rarer than talent." I stared down at the pages again, trying to steady my breath. "What if I fail?" Serena shrugged gracefully. "Then I lose money. You, however, lose something far more important, your belief in your ability to build. But I don't pick people who break easily." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. "You'd trust me with this," I whispered. "I already do," she said. The final page of the folder was a simple sheet with just 2 lines. "Retreat name project led Sutton Hale." Seeing my name typed there nearly knocked the air from my lungs. "You can walk away," Serena said gently. "Or you can sign and step into the life you were always supposed to have." I looked up at her, and for the first time in my adult life, someone wasn't asking me to shrink. Someone wasn't telling me what I couldn't do. Someone wasn't trying to shape me into their version of acceptable. She was offering me space. She was offering me a future. She was offering me a chance to exist without apology. I realized then that I had been searching for a permission slip my entire life. Not permission to succeed. Permission to live without fear. Serena slid a pen across the table. This isn't a contract for a job, Sutton. It's a contract for who you decide to be in 10 years. My hand trembled as I picked it up. I stared at the signature line until the ink blurred. Then slowly, steadily, I signed my name, not the name my father used as a weapon, but the name I was reclaiming as mine. When I set the pen down, Serena smiled, not triumphant, but proud in a way that felt honest. "Welcome to your real life," she said. For a moment I couldn't speak. The villa felt brighter, the air lighter. I stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, the breeze stirring the palms overhead. The world looked different, not because anything around me had changed, but because something inside me had. I walked toward my car with the folder pressed to my chest. The pavement was warm beneath my feet, and the Gulf air tasted like a beginning I never believed I'd earn. It was only later, as I drove away, that I realized something crucial. I hadn't just signed a project. I had signed a promise to myself. A promise to become a woman my father could no longer define. A promise to build something so real, so grounded, so alive, that even the shadows of Savannah couldn't reach it. I drove toward the horizon, toward Outer Banks, toward a life stitched together from the ruins of everything I'd survived. And for the first time in 13 years, I didn't feel like I was running. I felt like I was arriving. The road into the Outer Banks felt like it stretched across the edge of the world, a thin ribbon of asphalt between sky and sea. The coastline shimmered under the late afternoon sun, and wind swept across the dunes like it was carrying secrets from somewhere older than memory. My GPS announced I was 5 minutes from the property, but I already knew. You could feel it, the way the air shifted, the way silence thickened. This was a place waiting to be rebuilt. When I pulled into the narrow gravel driveway, I stopped breathing for a moment. Highland Shores stood at the cliff's edge like a forgotten relic. Weathered wooden panels hung slightly askew. The paint had faded into a mixture of gray and sunburned white. Several windows were cracked, and a loose shutter banged rhythmically in the wind, like it was warning me to turn back while I still could. A faded red sign tilted dangerously to one side, "Unsafe structure, do not enter." But I wasn't here to turn back. I was here to start. I shut off the engine, stepped onto the gravel, and inhaled deeply. The smell of salt pine and old wood mixed into something strangely comforting. The world was quiet, except for the waves crashing below the cliff. For a long moment I stood there, letting the wind whip my hair across my face, grounding myself in the feeling that this broken building was mine to restore. Behind me, a beat-up van rumbled onto the property. 5 people spilled out, all wearing the kind of chaotic, mismatched work clothes that immediately told me this wasn't a polished team. This was a group of people who weren't afraid to sweat. Caleb was the first to approach me, early 30s, tan from sun exposure, a tool belt slung around his hip, and a grin so wide it felt like he'd been waiting for this day. "Boss?" he asked. I blinked. "Me, Serena said you're running the show," he replied. "So, yeah, boss." Maya stepped forward next, tiny, sharp-eyed, wearing black overalls splattered with paint. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and nodded politely. "Designer. I'm here to make this place less haunted." Jonas, tall and quiet, gave me a firm handshake and a softer, almost shy smile. "Electrical and plumbing," he said. "Mostly plumbing. And some drywall. And whatever else breaks." Emily popped her head around Jonas, her curly hair tied up in a pencil. "I cook," she announced. "Don't ask what I cook. We'll figure that part out." Luis appeared last, camera slung over his shoulder, trying to act casual but clearly starstruck by the view. "Social media and communications," he said breathlessly. "This place is going to explode online." I looked at them, this team of mismatched personalities, all staring at me like I was supposed to lead them somewhere. Panic flickered under my ribs. "Okay," I said, exhaling slowly. "Let's get to work." We gathered by the entrance, and I pushed open the creaking door. Dust swirled up immediately. The interior was dim, but sunlight filtered in through broken slats, illuminating wooden beams and peeling wallpaper. It smelled like seawater had lived in the walls for a decade. As we walked through the entry hall, Jonas tapped a wall and said, "The structure's not bad. It's stubborn. It needs someone willing to fight with it." "I can fight," I said before thinking. Caleb chuckled. "Good. You'll need to." In the main room, a ceiling panel sagged dangerously. A ceiling fan hung by a wire, threatening to drop at any moment. A broken table lay on its side like it had been abandoned mid-argument. "This is where our guests will check in," Maya said, grimacing. "You know, eventually." Luis lifted his camera. "Actually, it's kind of aesthetic, like a before shot with soul." We worked through the building, one room at a time. The floors creaked so loudly, it felt like the entire structure was talking back. At one point, Caleb climbed a ladder to inspect a supporting beam right as the ladder wobbled. "Careful," I shouted, grabbing it just as it tilted. Caleb steadied himself, flashed me a sheepish grin. "This place is trying to kill me already. Then it better learn who it's dealing with," I muttered, and he laughed. We gathered on the front porch for a break, sitting in a rough circle on overturned buckets and old crates. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the ocean in streaks of orange and gold. For a moment, everything felt suspended in warmth. "Before we get ahead of ourselves," I said, "I want to set 3 rules." Everyone looked up. "1," I began, "no one gets punished for mistakes. We learn and we move on." Emily nodded enthusiastically. 2, if you see something wrong, structurally, emotionally, spiritually, speak up," Maya snorted. "Spiritually, I like you already." And 3, Highland Shores is meant to be a place of healing, for the people who come here, and for us too. Jonas's quiet voice finally rose. "The last manager said something similar. Didn't last long." I frowned. "What happened?" Jonas hesitated. "There was an accident." He didn't elaborate, and something in his tone suggested I shouldn't push. A chill rolled down my spine, but I tucked it away. After the break, we split into smaller teams. I worked with Maya and Jonas to clear out a storage room filled with old equipment. Dust coated our arms as we hauled out rusted items and broken lamps. Behind a stack of crates, I found something wedged into the wall, a leather-bound notebook covered in water stains. "What's that?" Maya asked. "Looks like a journal," I murmured. Most of the pages were legible notes from the original owner about guests, repairs, weather conditions, but several pages had been torn out. Entire chunks titled Year 12, The Breaking Point, were missing. Maya whistled softly. "Creepy." Jonas crossed his arms. "Probably nothing helpful." But I didn't believe that. Something about the missing pages felt intentional. As the afternoon faded into evening, the air turned cooler, and the house shifted around us, its old bones creaking with each gust of wind. When we finally gathered around the kitchen table, a wobbly thing Jonas promised to fix, we ate instant ramen straight from the pot and shared a cheap bottle of wine Caleb brought from the van. The power flickered twice before going out completely. Jonas shrugged, lit a cluster of candles, and the room transformed into something soft, warm, almost intimate. Shadows danced across the walls, and the sound of the ocean drifted through the open window. "This place," Maya murmured, staring at the candlelight. "It's rough. But it's got heart." "Everything broken has heart," Emily added. "That's why people want to fix it." I hadn't expected to feel anything, especially not belonging, but there it was, warm in my chest. I glanced at the others and found quiet, unspoken camaraderie. We were all running from something. We were all rebuilding something. It made the room feel full. As we cleaned up, a gust of wind slammed a window shut. A framed picture clattered off the wall and shattered. When I bent to pick up the pieces, I realized the impact had revealed something behind the paneling, a small metal door embedded in the wall, its lock rusted over but intact. "What is that?" Louise asked, leaning close. "Looks like an old utility compartment," Jonas said, kneeling to inspect it. "Or maybe A safe. A safe, my pulse quickened. We'll deal with it later, I said, though my curiosity gnawed at me. Before leaving for the night, Caleb handed me a set of keys. You staying here? He asked. For now, I said. Feels right. He nodded respectfully. Then good luck. This place listens to whoever leads it. I stepped outside onto the porch after everyone left. The wind from the Atlantic carried the smell of salt and hope, a strange mixture that made my chest tighten. Below, the waves crashed against the cliff, relentless but familiar. Highland Shores was broken, scarred, weathered, so was I. And maybe that was why I felt drawn to it, why I believed I could rebuild it. Because if we could bring this place back to life, maybe I could finally bring myself back too. I leaned on the railing, my breath fogging in the cool air. This is the beginning, I whispered to the waves. And it was. The morning sun crept through the thin motel curtains in a soft, watery glow, turning the edges of my room pale gold. I hadn't slept much. Serena's card lay on the nightstand, its black, matte surface catching the light like it was waiting for my decision. I'd memorized the number days ago, though I'd pretended I hadn't. Every hour since signing that folder, the edges of my fear pressed harder, whispering questions I wasn't sure I could answer. I picked up the phone before I lost my nerve. When the call connected, it wasn't Serena who answered. A clipped voice, said Dalton Ventures. One moment, please. Then another voice, calm and unmistakably hers, came through. I was expecting you. My breath caught. How come to Cape Coral? Today. Noon. And before I could ask anything else, the line went dead. I stared at the silence for several seconds, then grabbed my keys and walked out before my doubts could pin me to the floor. The drive south was a blur of mangrove trees, open sky, and the soft, hazy blue of water that shimmered along the road. The villa sat at the end of a quiet street, surrounded by bougainvillea vines and trimmed palms. The gate was open, as if the house already knew I was coming. Serena greeted me at the door with that same unshakable composure. For a moment, I felt like a child stumbling into a future too large for me. But then her expression softened. Come in, she said. We have things to discuss. Inside, the air was cool and fragrant citrus jasmine, something clean and expensive I couldn't name. The villa wasn't ostentatious. It was intentional. Soft sand-colored walls, art that looked hand-picked rather than decorative windows that framed the ocean like a living portrait. Sit, she said, motioning toward a chair near her desk. I did, clasping my hands together to keep them from trembling. You signed faster than I expected, Serena said, leaning back. That tells me you're braver than you think. Or more desperate, I murmured, before I could stop myself. Her lips curved faintly. Desperation rarely produces clarity. But whatever drove you here, it's useful. I looked down. You asked for honesty. So here it is. I'm scared. I'm scared I'm not enough. I'm scared I'll prove my father right. Serena studied me with a quiet intensity. Sudden fear is not the enemy. Silence is. But I've spent years in silence, I said, my voice shaking. And it never protected me. No, she said. But it taught you how to listen. How to see what others overlook. People who survive the way you did become leaders, without even realizing it. The words settled over me like warm sunlight. I didn't quite believe them, but something in me softened enough to consider the possibility. Come, Serena said, rising. There's something you need to see. She led me down a hall lined with framed photographs, her shaking hands with hotel staff hugging construction workers, touring old properties with blueprints tucked under her arm. Not billionaires, not investors, people who looked tired, hopeful, scraped thin by life and still standing. She stopped at a particular photo. A younger Serena, eyes fierce, standing in a conference hall. This was taken during the year I walked away from your father, she said. My breath caught. You and Warren worked together. For a short time, she replied, voice thin with memory. He humiliated me publicly, told investors I was reckless, emotional, unfit to lead. In front of a room full of men who already doubted me. Why would he? Because I threatened his vision of control, she cut in. Men like Warren Hale don't fear competition, they fear defiance. Her words struck me where I still bruised. She turned toward me fully. When I saw you that day at the motel, you reminded me of myself. Someone pushed aside, underestimated, told her worth and identity by others. But you didn't crumble. You negotiated upgrades for angry guests with dignity. You carried yourself with presence despite the circumstances. I swallowed hard. I didn't feel strong. Strength rarely feels like strength when you're living it, Serena said softly. We returned to her office. On the desk, she placed a thick folder with the word blueprint embossed at the top. This, she said, is the beginning. She opened it, revealing maps, sketches, financial outlines, and a proposal for a retreat along the Outer Banks. Wind-swept dunes, weathered cottages, space for healing. You'll run it, she said. Highland Shores will be your first project. I stared at the pages, heart pounding. Run it, Serena, I've been working at a motel. I don't have. You have everything you need, she interrupted gently. What you lack, you will learn. Leaders are not formed in classrooms. They are formed in the wreckage they refuse to stay buried in. I pressed my fingers to the table to ground myself. What if I fail? She didn't hesitate. Then you fail on your feet, not on your knees, and you start again. I exhaled shakily. $300,000. That's an investment, she finished, not charity. I don't invest in weakness. I invest in women who can turn broken things into sanctuaries. Something inside me cracked open, something that had been held tight for years. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble, but I felt released. You'll have a team, Serena continued. Young, talented, rough around the edges. They'll follow your lead. But you must give them a reason to trust you. I've never led anyone, I said. You led yourself through hell, she replied. That's more than most CEOs can claim. I let out a faint, startled laugh. I'm not a CEO. Not yet, she said, her eyes glinting. But you will be. Then she placed a pen beside the signature page. You're not choosing a job today, she said. You're choosing the woman you'll be 10 years from now. My hand hovered, trembled, then steadied. I signed. The moment the ink dried, Serena exhaled as though she'd been waiting for me to cross a threshold I didn't know existed. Welcome to your real life, she said quietly. When I walked back out to the driveway, the late afternoon sun was warm and golden, dappled on the pavement through the palm leaves. I carried the folder against my chest like it contained a new heartbeat. The breeze smelled like salt and possibility. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the road stretching ahead of me. A road I would travel to the Outer Banks, to Highland Shores, to a future built not from the ruins my family left behind, but from the strength I'd discovered inside those ruins. As I slid into my car, I whispered to myself, "You can do this." But what I really meant was I am finally becoming someone my father can no longer define. And that truth alone felt like the beginning of everything. The first time I saw Highland Shores in daylight, it felt less like a property and more like a test the universe had set in my path. Morning mist rolled off the Atlantic, thin enough to let the sun burn through, but thick enough to make the air taste like salt and expectation. The dunes rose in soft curves around the gravel, drive their long grasses swaying, as if whispering a warning. Are you sure you're ready for this? I stepped out of my car and let the wind hit me full in the face. The cottages looked worse than I remembered. Weather-beaten siding peeled in long strips, windows clouded by years of salt spray bowed inward like tired eyelids. Pieces of wood clung to rusted nails, and there, staked into the sand at a crooked angle, was the old metal sign, "Unsafe structure, do not enter." My heart knocked hard against my ribs. This wasn't a renovation. It was resurrection. But I had come too far to turn back. I was still standing there absorbing the enormity of it all, when the rumble of an engine broke the silence. The team Serena promised arrived in a battered white van, with one blue door and a missing hubcap. When it lurched to a stop, the sliding door flew open before the engine even shut off. Caleb jumped out first, boots kicking up sand. Beautiful, he declared. I stared at him. You think this is beautiful? He grinned, wiping sweat already forming on his brow. Not yet, but it will be. Maya climbed out next, shielding her eyes behind oversized sunglasses. It needs therapy, she said matter-of-factly. Deep spiritual therapy. Jonas stepped down with a quiet nod, toolbox in hand. Found the main breakers. Already looks like trouble. Emily followed with a grocery bag full of snacks. Don't worry, she said brightly. I brought energy. And chips. Luis stumbled out last, nearly tripping over his own camera bag. Okay, so lighting sucks, angles suck, building sucks. This is going to be perfect. Their optimism should have comforted me, but instead it made my chest tighten. They all looked at me waiting. Expecting, trusting. I wasn't sure I deserved that trust. I led them toward the entrance. Let's start inside. The front door protested loudly when I pushed it open, groaning like a living creature. Dust erupted into the sunlight, swirling in the air like ghosts of former guests. The lobby, or what was supposed to be a lobby, was a disaster. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips. The floor dipped unevenly. The reception counter leaned sideways, surrendering to gravity. Luis lifted his camera. This is tragic, he whispered reverently. Caleb pressed his palm to a supporting beam. Wood still good. Just stubborn. Like all of us, Emily joked. We continued deeper into the property, the floorboards creaking under our feet. In the largest cottage, the ceiling sagged in the middle. Jonas inspected it with a frown. Moisture damage. We'll need to replace the whole section. How long? I asked. He shrugged. Depends on how many miracles you're willing to pray for. I didn't laugh. I was too busy imagining every single thing that could go wrong, every cost, every hour, every weakness in myself that could sink this place before it ever rose. We returned to the porch to regroup. The sun hung low over the dunes, coloring the sand gold. My team formed a loose semicircle, waiting again, expecting again. I took a breath. Before we begin, I said, I need to establish a few ground rules. Rules? Emily blinked. Like grown-up rules? Exactly like grown-up rules, I said. They leaned in, curious. 1. No one gets punished for mistakes. We try, we learn, we fix. Maya raised her hand. Even if the mistake is cosmetic, hypothetically speaking. If someone, say me, paints a wall the wrong color, even then, I said. She nodded approvingly. Good, I'm impulsive. 2. If you see something unsafe, broken, or concerning, speak. Immediately. No hesitations. Jonas murmured, thank God. And 3. Highland Shores is going to be a place where people come to heal. That means we work in a way that reflects that. No cruelty, no chaos, no ego battles. Caleb scratched his chin. But a little chaos is okay, right? A little, I admitted. Controlled chaos. He grinned. Now that's my language. But Jonas's quiet voice cut through the light mood. The last manager said the same thing. I looked at him. And Jonas stared past us toward the cliff where waves crashed below. He left after the accident. The air shifted. Even the breeze seemed to pause. What accident? I asked softly. Jonas hesitated, then shook his head. Later. A knot of unease formed in my stomach, but there was no time to unravel it now. We worked the rest of the afternoon clearing out rooms. Cold air leaked through cracks in the walls. Boards crunched under our boots. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cried like a warning. Maya discovered a stack of old guest ledgers hidden behind a rusted filing cabinet. Emily found a sun-bleached map of the Outer Banks pinned behind a broken mirror. And I stumbled upon something stranger, a leather-bound journal tucked inside a storage closet beneath a pile of tangled extension cords. The first few pages were filled with careful handwriting notes about weather, trauma, guest check-ins, plans for expansion. But halfway through, entire sections were ripped out, torn violently, the edges jagged. Maya leaned over my shoulder. Creepy. Why do I feel like we're in a documentary? No one survives. It's probably nothing, I said, shutting the journal, but feeling anything but reassured. As sunset bled across the horizon, the power abruptly cut out. Darkness swallowed the cottages. The air went still. Not again, Jonas groaned. Fuse box is dead. He fumbled for a flashlight. Emily dug candles out of her bag, muttering, "At least I came prepared for romance or horror, whichever this becomes." We gathered in the main room, candles flickering, casting warm, dancing shadows across the damaged walls. The room felt softer, almost intimate. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor, warming her hands over the tiny flames. "This place," she murmured, "with the right touch could change someone's life." Her words hit something deep inside me. "I want it to," I said quietly. "I want this place to be somewhere people can finally breathe again." Luis pointed his camera at me without warning. "Say that again." "The part about healing." "No," I said quickly. "I'm not doing interviews." "Not yet," he corrected, "but you will." We ate dinner on the floor, cheap noodles, and a bottle of wine that tasted like regret and celebration. We talked, we laughed, we argued about wallpaper. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. A sudden gust of wind slammed the window behind us. A picture frame fell and shattered. When I knelt to pick it up, something pulled my attention, a metal outline hidden behind the fallen plaster. I brushed away dust. A small steel door. Maybe a safe. Maybe something else. "Whoa," Caleb breathed. "Treasure trouble," Jonas muttered. I didn't touch it. Not yet. After the team left, I lingered outside on the porch. The night air was cool against my skin, heavy with salt. The waves whispered below. This place was falling apart, yes, but there was a heartbeat underneath all the broken pieces. And maybe that was why I felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth swelling in my chest. Because rebuilding Highland Shores felt like rebuilding myself. One beam at a time. One room at a time. One breath at a time. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling both scared and steady. Tomorrow would bring more chaos, more work, more surprises. But for the first time in 13 years, I wasn't running away from something. I was walking toward something real, something mine. Highland Shores began to buzz in ways I hadn't anticipated. It happened gradually at first. A booking here. A curious tourist. There, a polite email from someone who'd heard about the place. But within 2 weeks of Martha's glowing review, the pace shifted, like a tide turning sharply under a moon I couldn't see. One morning, I stepped outside with a mug of coffee and found 2 women in yoga pants taking photos by the dunes. They waved enthusiastically, calling out, "We're here because of that blog, the one about a retreat that feels like home." By afternoon, a retired couple from Charlotte arrived, asking for the room with the candlelights. And a travel vlogger with 500,000 followers emailed requesting a stay in exchange for honest coverage. Honest coverage. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Inside the main cottage, sunlight spilled across the floor while hammers rang and sawdust hovered in the air. Caleb worked on replacing a cracked beam, and Maya was holding up fabric samples to the window to test natural lighting. Jonas knelt by an open panel in the entryway, rewiring a stubborn circuit. "This place is going viral," Luis declared as he barged in, phone in hand. "We've been reposted 10 times today by travel accounts aimed at women over 50. That demographic is basically our gold mine." "I thought the gold mine was the oceanfront location," Caleb muttered. Both Luis insisted. I smiled, overwhelmed but grateful. The retreat was starting to breathe. Alive, imperfect, but breathing. Then I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. The message preview made my stomach clench. "Are you the Sutton Hale from Savannah?" I didn't answer. I slipped the phone back into my pocket like it was burning my skin. Later that afternoon, as I checked a fresh stack of online inquiries, another email popped up, this one with no subject line and no sender name. "Does your father know what you're doing?" A cold rush slid down my spine. I deleted it immediately. then emptied the trash folder as if erasing it could erase the dread curling through my ribs. By evening, Serena called. "Heavy day?" she asked, voice carrying a strange mix of warmth and pragmatism. "People keep asking about my last name." I hesitated. "It makes me feel like I'm standing in two worlds." "You are," she said. "But that doesn't mean you belong to both." I didn't respond. She continued before I could gather words. "Listen carefully," Serena said. "Growth attracts attention. Attention attracts questions. And questions attract the wrong eyes. Don't panic. Don't explain. Just build." I exhaled. Easier said than done. Her tone softened. "Being self-made isn't easy. You're doing beautifully." I hung up, feeling steadier until the next surprise hit. That night, an email came from her office, 2 new project proposals attached labeled Sedona and Big Sur. I stared at them until my vision blurred. 2 new retreats. Me expanding just as panic began creeping up my throat. My phone began ringing. Serena's name flashed across the screen. "You're thinking too much," she said before I could speak. "I'm not ready," I whispered. "You weren't ready for Outer Banks either," she replied. "And look what you've built." Her confidence in me felt larger than the room. But before I could thank her, the line cracked with a faint echo like someone was listening. Then a low male voice cut through. "She's not ready." My breath stopped. Serena's tone sharpened. "Sutton, hang up now." The call dropped. I sat frozen for several seconds before I moved. Someone had interrupted the line. Someone watching. Someone who knew enough to find the connection between me and Serena. By morning, my nerves were thin, my eyes heavy. When my phone buzzed again with an unfamiliar number, my heart jumped. The message was from an email with a strange address, Lydia Hale, new start at Proton Mail. I opened it with shaking hands. "Don't come to Savannah. They're watching you. They're using you to distract from something bigger. Please, Sutton, stay away." Attached was a blurry photo, my father's office desk, a file labeled Press Monitoring Sutton Hale. The breath left my body. My father was tracking me. I closed my laptop too hard, the sound echoing through the cottage. I didn't realize I'd been gripping the table edge until my knuckles went white. Boss Caleb said from the doorway. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Long night." He eyed me like he could sense the truth anyway, but he didn't push. Hours later, Jonas approached me outside while replacing a railing on the porch. "Some guy came by earlier," he said. "Didn't give a name, just asked where you were." "What did he look like?" I asked, too quickly. "Black SUV. Dark glasses. The type who doesn't blink much." A tightness curled in my stomach. "What did you tell him that I didn't know?" Jonas replied. "And that this was private property." I exhaled. "Thank you." Jonas hesitated. "Be careful," he said quietly. "There's a reason people leave Savannah in silence." His words hit harder than he knew. That evening, when the team gathered to discuss the Sedona and Big Sur proposals, I couldn't shake the lingering tension. But their support grounded me, even as the fear lingered at the edges of my mind. "We'll expand," Maya said confidently. "Just not at the cost of our sanity." "Or yours," Caleb added. Luis waved his camera dramatically. "We're going to build a healing empire, one retreat at a time, no fear." "Less dramatics, more spreadsheets," Emily teased. Their faith in me steadied something inside me that had been trembling since childhood. Then Serena arrived. She stepped into the cottage with the poised grace of someone who had stood on stages, fought battles in boardrooms, and rebuilt her life more than once. Her presence quieted the room instantly. "I need a word with Sutton," she said. We stepped outside into the cool evening air. "You're receiving attention from places that concern me," she said calmly. "I know, and your father is likely orchestrating at least part of it." My throat tightened. "What do I do?" "You do nothing," she said firmly. "Silence is protection. You don't fight shadows. You outgrow them." I stared at her. "Your father uses power like a shield," she continued. "But there's one thing: he cannot control your growth. The more you rise, the more the truth works against him." "I feel like I'm being hunted," I whispered. Serena's gaze softened. Then we build faster, smarter, steadier. She placed a hand on my shoulder. And we do not let them define you. Later that night, as I stood on the porch overlooking the moonlit ocean, my phone buzzed again. A news alert, Hail Financial under scrutiny by anonymous whistleblower. The words glowed on my screen like prophecy. The wind swept my hair across my face, the waves crashed against the cliff, and deep inside me something shifted. Highland Shores wasn't just my first retreat, it was my declaration, my boundary, my rebirth. And Savannah, my family, my past, could not erase that now. Under the dim porch light, I whispered into the wind, "You don't get to choose who I become anymore." But I had no idea that Sedona would soon pull me into a storm far bigger than anything I had survived so far. The sun in Sedona didn't rise, it ignited. Scarlet cliffs caught fire with the first light of morning, throwing long shadows across the desert floor, as if the land itself were preparing for battle. I stood at the edge of the construction site, staring at the half-framed structures and pallets of materials scattered across the red earth. From a distance, everything looked promising. Up close, it was chaos waiting to happen. Caleb hurried toward me with a stack of papers that looked like they'd been through a hurricane. "Morning, boss. You'll want to see this." I took the top sheet. My stomach turned. "Why are our repair costs up 30%? I asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sedona's expensive, but not this expensive." Behind him, workers hammered away at support beams. A forklift beeped as it backed up toward a storage pod. The air smelled of sawdust and heat. I scanned the next page. These numbers don't make sense. "And what's this note?" I pointed to. A line scribbled in blue pen. "Check these invoices, suspicious." Caleb frowned. "We didn't write that." A chill trickled down my spine. Before I could respond, the CFO Elise marched across the site wearing black slacks and an expression that suggested she was calculating how much damage the world could do to us in 30 seconds. "We need to talk," she said. That was never a good start. Inside the temporary office trailer, she spread spreadsheets across the table. Material costs are up, labor costs are up. Transportation is up. If we don't cut staff or adjust payroll immediately, we'll be underwater by next quarter. "No," I said instantly. "We are not cutting staff." Elise pressed her fingers to her temples. "Sutton, I admire your heart, but math doesn't care about heart." "Then we'll renegotiate supplier contracts," I said. "Look at alternatives." "Already tried," she replied. "Sedona's supply chain is stretched thin. Everyone's building something." Jonas stepped into the trailer, lowering his voice. "I think someone's been altering the supplier contracts." Elise's head snapped up. What Jonas pulled a folded sheet from his pocket, found this taped inside the breaker box. 2 versions of the same contract, one we saw, one someone else approved. He laid them out. My pulse spiked. One listed reasonable costs. The other inflated them by thousands. "Where did this second approval come from?" Elise asked. Jonas pointed to the tiny print at the bottom. "Email approval, mhartley@hfgroup-admin.com, HF Group, Hail Financial, my last name, my father's empire." My breath caught. Jonas and Elise exchanged confused looks, but I knew exactly what it meant. Someone in Savannah was manipulating Sedona's finances. My family had reached into my life again this time, without even bothering to hide the fingerprints. I stepped outside, the desert heat slamming into me. The sky felt too big, pressing down, turning the air thick and unsteady. My phone buzzed. "Serena." "I need to talk," I answered immediately. "You sound rattled," she said. I told her everything, every suspicious number, every altered invoice, the HF Group email. Silence stretched across the line. "They're interfering," she finally said. "Your father is pulling strings. Why—" My voice cracked. "Why sabotage Sedona? Because your success shifts the narrative," she said. "And powerful men hate losing control of a story." I gripped the edge of the trailer, knuckles white. "What do I do?" Nothing, she said sharply. Do not cancel contracts. Do not confront suppliers. Stay still. When enemies think you're paralyzed, they reveal themselves. I don't want to be a pawn in whatever game this is. You're not, she replied, but he wants you to feel like one. The line held quiet for a moment. Then Serena added softly, he tried the same trick on me once. I survived. You will too. When the call ended, I stood motionless, letting the heat sting my skin, grounding myself the only way I knew how, by refusing to collapse. I walked the site again, trying to focus on the work. But every sound felt heavier, every shadow sharper, every worker passing by seemed like a warning. Around noon, as the crew broke for lunch, I crossed the gravel lot to my rental car. That's when the black SUV rolled in smooth, expensive tinted. The engine cut. A man stepped out. Gray suit, sunglasses. Expression unreadable. He walked toward me, but not too close. Miss Hale, he said with a slight nod. How do you know my name? I asked. He didn't answer that. Instead, he handed me a sealed envelope. What is this? I demanded. A message, he said. Just read it. And be careful who you trust. Who sent you? He paused. Someone in your family who still cares whether you survive this. Then he turned, got into the SUV, and disappeared down the road like a ghost who'd fulfilled an obligation. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. Savannah never forgets. And neither does your father. Step lightly. No signature, just a warning that felt like a threat. Back in the trailer, I laid out every invoice, every altered contract, every questionable approval in a long, straight line across the table. The documents looked like puzzle pieces, some bright, some dark, all connected to something bigger than Sedona. Elise stood beside me. This isn't normal. Someone's bleeding your project. I nodded, unable to speak. Should I contact the lawyers? She asked. No, I said. Not yet. My laptop chimed a low electronic warning. Then the screen flickered. Lines of text blinked, then vanished. Without me touching anything, the entire system shut down. Remote access. A forced shutdown. Someone had just reached into my computer. I sank into the chair, heart hammering. The air inside the trailer felt thin, electric. I'd known for years what my father could do to people who threatened his legacy. But knowing was different from feeling his shadow stretching across a desert hundreds of miles away. That night, after the workers had gone and the desert fell quiet, I sat alone in the dimly lit trailer. Outside, the cliffs glowed under the last trace of sunlight. Coyotes howled in the distance. I stared at the numbers, the evidence, the tangled mess of sabotage. Two choices lay in front of me. Cut staff, cut corners. Cut myself down to fit the crisis, or fight. Slow, steady, honest, the way Serena said. I closed my eyes. In the dark behind them, I saw my father's face from the night I left, cold, unbothered, dismissing me without a shred of hesitation. No, not again. I opened my eyes and whispered to the empty room, I won't be broken because it's convenient for him. I picked up my pen, reviewed every number, every invoice, every possibility, and I chose the harder path. No layoffs, I muttered. We build with integrity, even if it breaks me. My phone buzzed on the table. I expected Elise or Serena. Instead, it was a news alert. Hale Financial under preliminary federal review for offshore transactions. I stared at the headline until the words steadied into shape. My father's empire was beginning to crack, and the storm at Sedona, it wasn't an accident. It was connected. I looked out at the desert, vast, ancient, unflinching. Somewhere in its stillness, I felt my spine straighten. If Savannah wanted a war, I wouldn't fight them with their weapons. I would fight them with the thing they never expected, my resilience. The sky over Sedona was still fading from violet to deep blue when I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Astor Ridge Organic Market. The plan was simple: grab coffee, clear my head, and figure out how to salvage a project that felt like it was unraveling in slow motion. But as soon as I stepped out of the car, I felt eyes on me. A woman in her early 40s stood near the store entrance, clutching a canvas grocery bag. Her expression flickered with recognition. My stomach tightened. "Sudden?" she asked, hesitant but certain. I froze. "Yes." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm your cousin, on your mother's side." I blinked, unable to process the words. "My name's Kara," she said, offering a trembling smile. "I used to visit Savannah when we were little. You probably don't remember. You were always quiet. Sweet." My chest tightened with an ache I hadn't expected. "What are you doing here?" I managed. She glanced nervously toward the parking lot. "I heard you were in Arizona. I've been trying to reach you for months." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Why?" "Because," she whispered, "your father isn't the only one digging into your business. There are people inside Hale Financial who think you're a liability. The review in Savannah, that wasn't an accident. And it isn't just him." I swallowed hard. "What do you want from me to help?" Her voice cracked. "I owed your mother that much." The mention of my mother hit like a blow. "How is she?" Kara hesitated. Not good. She's been silent for too long, and now everything's collapsing. Your father's temper is worse than ever. His board is divided, and your name keeps coming up." "My name, yes." She touched my arm gently. "Someone thinks exposing you will take the heat off them." My pulse echoed in my ears. The truth was forming faster than I could breathe. Before I could speak, a deep male voice called across the parking lot. Kara, we both flinched. A man in a navy jacket strode toward us with an air of controlled urgency. His posture was stiff, protective. He stopped a few steps away, eyes narrowing at me. "You shouldn't be talking here," he warned. "It's not safe." Kara nodded quickly. "Right, I know, I was just—" "We're leaving," he said firmly. He shot me a suspicious glance, then ushered her toward a silver sedan. But before she slipped inside, she looked back at me, panic flashing in her eyes. "Be careful," she whispered. "Please." And then she was gone. I stood there in the cooling desert air, heart pounding, coffee forgotten. Panic curled inside me, mixing with something sharper, resolve. Whatever storm was brewing in Savannah wasn't stopping at my doorstep. It was coming straight toward me. Inside Astor Ridge, I ordered coffee I barely tasted. My hands shook as I scrolled through my phone. Dozens of missed emails, messages from investors, updates from Sedona. But one notification stood out, an anonymous text. "They're using the Sedona losses to blame you. Do not trust the new suppliers." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Someone was sabotaging this project on purpose. And someone connected to my past, was trying to warn me. Back at the construction site, the sun had climbed higher, baking the red earth into a hard crust. Workers moved around briskly, unaware of the invisible cracks forming beneath the business. Caleb waved me over from the shade of the storage pod. "Sutton, please tell me we're okay. Because I just had a heated argument with a man who tried to deliver the wrong lumber again." "What do you mean, again?" "This is the third incorrect order," he said, voice rising. I checked the vendor. "It's not the one we chose. Someone changed the purchase order." My heartbeat accelerated. "Show me." We walked into the trailer where Elise stood, surrounded by paperwork that looked like it had multiplied overnight. She didn't waste time with greetings. "Someone rerouted our supply lines," she said, pushing a stack of invoices toward me. "And they did it cleanly. No obvious digital trail. Whoever did this has experience. And power," I murmured. Elise nodded grimly. "Exactly." Before I could ask more, Jonas burst in holding a cracked tablet. "Boss, we've got a problem. Someone's been accessing our internal project logs remotely." "How remotely?" Elise demanded. "As in Savannah remotely." Silence hit the trailer like a dropped hammer. I forced myself to breathe. "Can they manipulate anything from there?" Jonas shook his head. "No, I shut down the remote access. But we need to assume everything was compromised." Elise leaned against the wall, exhaling hard. "This isn't a coincidence. Sedona's being targeted. By who? Caleb asked. The answer hung unspoken in the air, my father. But I wasn't ready to say it aloud. Instead I said, we fix this. We build honestly. We don't cut corners. Elise nodded slowly. I'll reroute everything. But it's going to cost us. Then we'll adjust. No layoffs. No shortcuts. Caleb exhaled. You sure positive? I said, though the weight of it made my ribs ache. By late afternoon, the desert wind picked up swirling dust across the half-built structures. I walked the site alone, weaving between scaffolding and exposed beams. The land felt tense, watching, listening. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text: you weren't supposed to leave Savannah. They never forgave you. And now they're afraid of you. A stone dropped into my stomach. I looked up at the red cliffs rising in jagged lines against the sky. For a moment they looked like the spine of something ancient, something unbreakable. I whispered into the wind, I'm not afraid of them anymore. But fear wasn't the problem. Betrayal was. Someone inside Sedona was leaking information, selling us out, feeding my father's circle. I just didn't know who. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I gathered the team on the porch of the main cottage. The air smelled like sawdust and toast-warm earth. We need to stay sharp, I told them. There's sabotage happening. Someone's tampering with contracts and materials. Caleb frowned. Someone on the inside, maybe, I said. Maybe not. But we don't let fear dictate our work. Maya crossed her arms. Well, you're the only one who looks afraid. I blinked. I'm not. Yes, you are, she said softly. And that's okay. But don't let it isolate you. She stepped closer. You're not alone here. The words cracked something inside me, something I didn't realize had been clenched since childhood. Before I could thank her, a low rumble shook the ground. It wasn't thunder. It was an explosion. A plume of red dust shot up from the back of the property. Jonas sprinted toward us, shouting, The generator! Someone tampered with it. The world spiraled into chaos. Workers shouting, lights flickering, the smell of burning wire filling the air. But all I could think was Sedona wasn't just a challenge. Sedona was a warning. And whoever was trying to break this project was getting bolder. The smoke from the generator fire still hung faintly in the air the next morning, clinging to the desert wind like a warning no one wanted to say out loud. Workers moved cautiously across the site, their voices quiet, their eyes flicking toward every sound. The explosion hadn't hurt anyone by some miracle, but it had shaken every person there, especially me. I stood beside the charred remains of the generator, arms folded tightly over my chest. The metal frame was twisted, blackened, warped, like something ripped open from the inside. Jonas crouched beside it, his face pinched in concentration. It wasn't an accident, he said, confirming what I already feared. What did you find? I asked. He tapped the ruined casing. Someone loosened the fuel coupling. On purpose. You can see the scrape marks. I swallowed hard. Any prints? He hesitated before shaking his head. Whoever did this wiped everything. Caleb approached, sweat dripping down his temples, even though the morning heat hadn't peaked yet. We found tracks near the fence line out back, tire tread. They don't match any crew vehicles. My pulse thudded. Someone drove in, or someone drove out, Caleb said grimly. We stood in a tense triangle for a moment, sand swirling around our boots. Fear pressed on my lungs from the inside, thick and heavy. But beneath it was something sharper, anger, old and familiar, rising like a tide I could no longer hold back. That's when Serena's rental car pulled onto the lot, kicking up a haze of red dust. She stepped out wearing a linen blazer too elegant for the desert, but somehow perfect on her. Her eyes took in the damage with a single sweep. When you called, I thought you were exaggerating, she said. You weren't. No, I said quietly. I wasn't. She approached the wreckage, kneeling gracefully beside Jonas. This was deliberate. Professional. Jonas nodded. Not a kid's vandalism. Someone knew what they were doing. Serena stood turned to me and lowered her voice. You need to tell me if your father has ever used intimidation tactics like this. I stopped breathing. She watched me closely. Sutton. The truth hovered on my tongue like smoke. My father had never threatened me physically, but he didn't need to. Richard Hale had connections, political, financial, and darker ones whispered about in Savannah's oldest rooms. He'd never dirtied his own hands. He didn't have to. I don't know, I whispered. He's capable of things. But this, Serena finished for me, feels personal. I nodded. It is personal, she said, and it's designed to destabilize you. The words stung because they were true. Before I could respond, Elise stormed toward us from the office trailer holding a stack of printed emails. You need to see this, she said breathlessly. We gathered inside the trailer, buzzing with stale air and tension thick enough to choke on. Elise spread the papers across the table. These messages were pulled from our internal server this morning, she said. Someone's been communicating with an outside party. Detailed updates about Sedona's finances, delays, staffing, and she hesitated, her voice faltering. And about you. My stomach dropped. About me. She handed me one of the pages. The email read status. She's overwhelmed. A few more setbacks and she'll fold. Next hit payroll. That will push her to the edge. It was signed with an initial. Just one letter L. Maya's voice shook. Who the hell is L? I stared at the letter. One small shape, one curve, one threat. Luis, Lennox, Lydia, Larkin, Logan. Too many possibilities, too many shadows. Serena placed a reassuring hand on my arm. We'll figure it out. But first we need to secure the payroll accounts. If they get into that, it'll cripple everything. I stood still for a long moment. The trailer buzzed around me with frantic voices, rustling papers, ringing phones. But all I heard was the ocean from my childhood pounding the shore of Savannah, echoing a warning I'd ignored for years. You're never really free from where you came from. I finally whispered. Do it. Elise nodded and rushed out. I stepped outside, needing air, needing space, needing anything that didn't feel like the ground was breaking beneath me. The sun had climbed high, blazing across the red rock cliffs. Heat shimmered off the sand in waves. I walked toward the ridge at the edge of the site where the desert opened wide to the horizon. The wind tugged at my shirt, hot and dry, smelling faintly of sage. A shadow appeared beside me. Caleb. You okay? He asked quietly. No, I said honestly. He nodded. Good. Because pretending right now would be crazy. A short, sharp laugh escaped me. You're supposed to reassure me. I'm supposed to tell you the truth, he replied. And the truth is, you're doing everything right. People don't sabotage a failure. They sabotage a threat. The words hit me like sunlight cracking through storm clouds. Before I could reply, Luis jogged toward us from the site. He looked rattled. Sutton, he called, panting slightly. You need to see this. He handed me his phone. On the screen was a breaking news update. Federal officials question Hale Financial's offshore holdings. Sources suggest internal whistleblower may be involved. My heart hammered. Another article loaded below it. Anonymous leak reveals discrepancies in Hale subsidiary contracts. One project under scrutiny. Sedona retreat. Sedona. My project. My name. My past. My present. Colliding. I stared at the screen. They're trying to tie Sedona to my father's investigation. Serena appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. No, she said firmly. This is misdirection. Someone in Savannah is diverting attention. You are not the story they want you to be, the distraction. I swallowed hard. So what do we do? Serena looked at me with something fierce and unwavering in her eyes. Truth does its own work, she said. Your job is to stand still long enough for it to land where it's meant to. The ground shook again, not from an explosion this time, but from the weight of revelation. Someone in my family was working against me. Someone else, Kara, the anonymous messages, was trying to protect me. And Sedona had become the battleground between them. Hours later, after emergency meetings and frantic restructuring, the site grew quiet as the workers left. Evening settled gently across the desert, casting lavender shadows against the cliffs. I walked alone through the half-built structures, my footsteps echoing across unfinished floors. The silence felt alive, whispering truths I'd spent years trying not to hear. When I reached the ridge again, I pulled out my phone. 2 messages waited. One from Serena, "Stand tall. They can't break what you refuse to surrender." And one from an unknown number, "They're coming after payroll next. Trust no one. Not even the ones who look loyal." I stared at the message, my skin prickling. Not even the ones who look loyal. The desert wind rose, lifting dust around my feet. In the fading light, Sedona didn't look like a project anymore. It looked like a confrontation. My past versus my future. My family versus my name. Their legacy versus the one I was building. I closed my eyes, letting the heat and silence wash over me. Then I whispered into the desert, steady and unshakable, "I'm not folding, no matter who tried to break me. Not this time." The courthouse in Phoenix rose like a monolith of sandstone and glass-hard lines against a sky too blue to feel merciful. Cameras swarmed the steps like vultures waiting for a body to fall. I tightened my grip on my bag as I climbed the stairs, Serena walking beside me with the poise of a woman who had survived bigger battles than this. Inside, the air was cool and tense. Murmurs echoed off marble floors. The sign-in table was crowded with reporters, lawyers, and people who thrived on spectacle. And there, standing near the entrance to courtroom 3, was the last person I expected to see. My father. Richard Hale stood tall in a tailored navy suit, silver hair combed back with precision, posture rigid with superiority. His eyes found mine instantly. The impact was electric, sharp, painful, familiar. His jaw tightened. He didn't greet me. He didn't nod. He simply turned away, as if the sight of me had confirmed something he already believed. Serena leaned close. "Don't let him take the air out of the room. You earned the right to stand here." I steadied my breathing and stepped inside the courtroom. Noah Blake, the attorney Serena had brought in for me, a man with a calm voice and eyes that missed nothing, met us at the bench table. "The judge is punctual," he murmured. "Once she enters, this moves fast." Across the aisle, my father sat with his attorney, a heavy-set man in an expensive suit whose expression said he enjoyed tearing people apart. A file marked Hale Financial lay open between them. But beside it, stacked in slim, crisp folders, were files labeled Sedona Accounting, Outer Banks, staffing Highland Shores operations. My projects, my life. He was dragging everything I'd built into the courtroom, and he looked ready to weaponize it. When the judge entered, the courtroom fell silent. My father's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that Miss Hale," he gestured toward me, "without looking, knowingly benefited from Hale Financial Resources, concealed financial misconduct in Sedona, and engaged in breaches of contract harming my client's company." The words struck me like stones. I barely had time to absorb them before he turned the knife. "And we intend to show," he continued, "that Miss Hale's ventures are not independent, as she publicly claims, but subsidized by Hale Financial through back channels." Whispers rippled across the gallery. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a legal case, it was a public execution. Noah stood without rushing. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Miss Hale built her company without a single cent from Hale Financial. We will also present evidence that her projects were targeted, sabotaged from within by individuals acting on behalf of the plaintiff." My father's head snapped up. Good, I thought. Feel the blow. The judge nodded. "Begin." For the next hour, my father's attorney attacked everything. Sedona's financial inconsistencies, the altered supply orders, the generator explosion, every weakness they'd managed to manipulate. He twisted facts into narratives that made me look incompetent, reckless, deceitful. I sat frozen, knuckles white, trying not to let fear seep through my expression. When it was Noah's turn, the air shifted. He walked to the center of the room, calm as dusk. "Let's begin with the Sedona invoices," he said. He presented the two versions. Jonas had found the real contracts, and the altered ones linked to the HF Group email. "Notice the signature approval," Noah said. "Not from my client, but from someone within Hale Financial." A murmur rippled across the room. Noah continued. "We also have evidence that Sedona's payroll system was accessed remotely from Savannah without Miss Hale's authorization." He clicked to the next exhibit, and suddenly, the courtroom felt colder. Projected onto the screen was an internal Hale Financial log. A list of login attempts, several successful entries, all tagged with one name: Lydia Hale. My aunt, my father's sister. The courtroom tilted around me. My father's composed mask shattered for a split-second, shock cracking through the rigid lines of his face. His attorney sputtered. "This is fabricated." "It is not," Noah said calmly, "and we have more." He turned the page. The next exhibit hit harder than any blow my father had ever delivered: the anonymous warnings I'd received, the screenshots of tampered orders, the message from Kara, the generator sabotage report. Piece by piece he laid out the truth. I was not stealing from Hale Financial. Hale Financial was trying to destroy me. By the time Noah finished, even the reporters in the gallery sat motionless. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hale," she said, addressing my father directly, "do you deny that your company accessed your daughter's financial systems?" His face went red. "I did not authorize this," he said, voice shaking with fury and humiliation. "But it happened under your organization," she replied. His chest heaved. "Lydia acted on her own." The judge's tone hardened. "Whether she did or not, the evidence is clear. Miss Hale did not misuse family funds. In fact, she was the victim of internal interference." My father looked like the ground had been pulled from beneath him. Then, with a sharp crack of the gavel, the judge delivered the words that would echo across every room of my life. "The claims against Miss Hale are dismissed in full. Furthermore, this court recommends that Hale Financial be reviewed for internal misconduct." Heads turned. Cameras clicked. Reporters bolted. My father stood abruptly, gathering his papers and shaking hands. For a moment I thought he might look at me. Apologize. Acknowledge something, anything. He didn't. He walked out of the courtroom as if he could outrun the truth. When the room finally cleared, I sat back, breath trembling out of me like I'd been underwater for months and only now surfaced. Serena touched my shoulder. "You did it." "No," I whispered. "We did." A quiet voice spoke from the aisle. I turned. Hannah stood there, my sister, with tears shining in her eyes. She stepped closer. I gave Noah the files, the ones from Uncle Lydia's drawer. My breath caught. You were the whistleblower," I whispered. She nodded, lip trembling. "I couldn't watch them destroy you." "Not again." I embraced her without thinking, the kind of hug we hadn't shared since childhood. She cried into my shoulder. I held her tighter. When she pulled back, she said softly, "You don't have to come home, Sutton. Just don't shut me out again." "I won't," I promised. Outside the courthouse, the desert sun was blinding. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted my name. But for the first time in years, I didn't shrink. I stood straight. The truth had finally done its work, and I wasn't afraid of my father anymore. Not now, not ever again. The morning after the verdict, Los Angeles looked different, brighter somehow, as if the smog had lifted just enough to let sunlight reach places it usually ignored. From the 32nd floor balcony of my apartment, the city stretched out in clean, sharp lines, glass catching the morning light, traffic humming below like a pulse. For the first time in years, the world felt still. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was simply standing. Inside, my phone buzzed with non-stop notifications, articles, messages, congratulations, questions. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to speak publicly. Not yet. The truth had only just settled. My bones needed a moment to catch up. By noon, I was in the office. The team had been instructed not to crowd me, but the energy inside the building was unmistakable, hopeful, buzzing, relieved. People looked up from their desks as I walked by. Some nodded, some smiled. A few simply placed hands over their hearts, as if saying, "We saw what you did. We're with you." Jason stood near the conference room door, hands in his pockets. "Morning," he said with a grin that softened everything sharp about him. "You saw the news," he scoffed. "Saw it. Half the industry hasn't shut up about it. Your stock is metaphorically through the roof." I raised an eyebrow. Metaphorically? Literally. Too soon. But metaphorically, you're on fire. His casual confidence made me smile, something unnatural but welcome. "What's on the schedule?" "Strategy meeting," he replied. "Press requests, expansion updates, and—" He hesitated. "Your mother?" I froze. What? "She's here," he said gently, "in the lobby." A cold wave washed over me. It didn't sting, it numbed. "I'll bring her up if you want." I swallowed. "Give me a minute." He nodded and disappeared into the conference room. I walked into my office and closed the door, leaning against it. My hands trembled lightly the way they used to when I was 19, and trying to stand up to a father who towered over every part of my life. Seeing him yesterday in court, watching the truth unravel, his confidence should have felt like victory. But it didn't. It felt like a chapter closing with the heaviness of something irreversible. But my mother being here, that was not part of any chapter I had prepared for. A soft knock at the door. Before I could respond, it opened. She stepped in quiet as a memory. Her posture was perfect, her navy dress pressed her pearl earrings, simple, elegant. But it was her face that struck me, paler than I remembered, lined with exhaustion, eyes holding something I had never seen in them, remorse. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I didn't answer immediately. I wasn't sure which version of myself she expected, the daughter who stayed silent, or the woman who'd learned to speak. She took a hesitant step forward. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me." "I didn't know you would come," I said, my voice thin but steady. "I read your sister's message," she murmured. Then the verdict. And I realized, I've been quiet for too long. The air felt fragile between us. "You weren't just quiet," I said. "You watched him push me out, and you let it happen." Her eyes glistened. "I know. He didn't just cut me off financially," I continued. "He exiled me. He erased me. And you stood there." She clasped her hands together. I told myself I was protecting the family. Protecting order. But the truth is, I was protecting my fear. A tear escaped down her cheek. "I read your story in the Times," she whispered. "I read your words. You said honor means nothing without compassion. I never taught you that. You learned it alone." I blinked hard, forcing the burning in my eyes to quiet. She stepped closer. "I'm proud of you, Sutton. Proud of the woman you are. Proud of what you built without us. And I'm ashamed it took losing you to understand what that meant." I pressed my fingertips to the edge of my desk, grounding myself. "You can hate me," she said. "You earned that right." I shook my head slowly. "I don't hate you. I just didn't know if you'd ever see me." Her breath broke. "I'm seeing you now." For a long moment, neither of us moved. We simply stood in the quiet, letting the truth settle between us. Then she reached out, tentative. I let her draw me into her arms. For the first time since I'd walked out of that house 13 years ago, I felt my mother hold me, not out of duty, not for appearances, but because she finally realized the weight of the silence she had carried. When she pulled back, her voice was trembling. "Your sister wants to visit. Together. No pressure. Only if you want to." I thought of Hannah standing in that courtroom, tears in her eyes, handing me the truth that saved me. "Tell her yes," I said. My mother exhaled shakily, relief softening her shoulders. "Thank you," she left quietly. She always left quietly. But this time I didn't feel abandoned. I felt acknowledged. Later that afternoon, I met with Serena at her Pasadena home. Jacaranda petals blanketed the walkway like soft lavender snow, and the sun dipped gently through the branches. She poured tea the way she always did, slow, deliberate, precise. "You seem lighter," she observed. "I saw my mother today," I said. She apologized. Serena nodded as if she had expected it. "And did you accept it?" "Yes." "Then you freed her," she replied. "And yourself." I took a sip of tea, the citrus note warm and grounding. "You know," she added, folding her hands, "you've already closed the loop you spent 13 years fearing. The rest of your life isn't about proving anything now. It's about living." "Living," I repeated quietly. "Joy," she said. "Love. Rest. Real companionship. You've earned it." Her words sifted through me like soft sand, settling in places I hadn't known were empty. When I left her house, the late afternoon light painted everything gold. Pasadena felt unreal in its beauty, quiet, old-souled, forgiving. At the office, the halls were mostly empty. Workers had gone home, lights dimmed. Only one remained illuminated: the photo wall. Images of our properties, Highland Shores, Sedona, Astor Ridge, hung in neat rows, each frame a story. Each story a step toward the person I had become. At the end of the hall, one photo stood out, the very first image ever taken of Highland Shores. The paint half finished, the wooden planks uneven, a crooked sign above the door. Maya's handwriting on the bottom corner: "Before she became ours." I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. Before she became mine, I thought. Before I became me. Forgiveness wasn't a surrender, it was the final, quiet claim of victory. As I stood there under the soft glow of the hallway lights, I realized something simple and powerful. I wasn't standing between two worlds anymore. I had finally stepped fully into my own. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of Florida heat that wrapped itself around your skin like silk, warmed by the sun. Palm Beach glittered under the street lamps, each one casting reflections across polished marble sidewalks and the tinted windows of luxury cars. But it was the breakers, towering, luminous, timeless, that owned the night. Inside its grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers rained gold light across hundreds of guests. The room pulsed with low laughter, clinking glasses, and the murmured hum of wealth and secrecy. Every table was lined with white roses, every chair draped in ivory satin, and every eye within minutes would turn toward me. But for a few quiet moments, I stood backstage alone, listening to the rhythm of the evening from behind heavy velvet curtains. My palms rested on the cool edge of a marble pedestal. My breath was steady. My heart was not racing. I had expected to feel fear. Instead, I felt still. A host walked past, checking his cards. "Miss Hale," he asked softly. "We're just about ready." I nodded. The applause for the speaker before me faded. A new hush fell. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the recipient of this year's Architect of Renewal Award, a woman whose work has transformed the standard of healing retreats nationwide, Sutton Hale." I stepped into the light. The crowd rose in a gentle wave of applause. Faces shone beneath chandeliers. Cameras flashed from discreet corners of the room. Strangers smiled as if they had known me long before my name ever made headlines. But I was not looking at them. I saw them instead near the front, sitting together for the first time in years, without tension drawing a line between them. My mother, my sister, and a seat between them empty. A seat where my father would have sat had he chosen truth. My heels clicked lightly on the stage floor. My gown, a deep sapphire silk that shimmered with movement, caught the light like shifting ocean water. I held the glass award gently, as though it were something alive. The microphone felt warm beneath my fingertips. When I built my first retreat, I began voice steady. I wasn't trying to create an empire. I was just trying to build a place where people could breathe again. Soft laughter, soft murmurs. But what I didn't realize, I continued, is that healing isn't only for the guests who walk through our doors. Sometimes, it's for the person standing behind them. The ballroom went quiet in that tender, reverent way only truth can command. I spent 13 years believing distance was the only way to survive a family that had taught me silence. But survival isn't enough. Not when you're capable of rebuilding everything you lost, including the parts of yourself you thought were gone forever. I looked at my mother. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her smile held firm. I stand here because people believed in me when I didn't know how to believe in myself. My mentor, my team, my sister, even strangers who saw my work and trusted its purpose. A breath, slow, grounded, and I learned something through it all. You don't reclaim your story by fighting back. You reclaim it by moving forward so powerfully that the past can't keep up. The applause rose gently like waves nodding against the shore. I smiled, not wide, not flashy, just enough to let the warmth in my chest become visible. Thank you, I said, for seeing the woman I chose to become. When I left the stage, the ballroom came alive again. String music, clinking silverware, bursts of conversation. People reached out to congratulate me. Hands shook mine. Someone pressed a business card into my palm. Another asked when the next retreat would open. I answered with grace, but my mind drifted toward the terrace doors, where warm Atlantic air slipped through each time someone passed. I needed a moment alone. Outside the night was soft and warm. Palm trees swayed lightly above the lit courtyard. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, sleek black limousines, glinting under streetlights, like guardian silhouettes. The sight made something inside me still. 13 years ago, I'd left Savannah with 2 suitcases. Tonight, I arrived in a fleet of cars I never asked for, but earned through every scar, every bruise, every rising. Behind me, footsteps approached. My sister stood there, gold dress, shimmering hair pulled back in soft waves, just like mine used to be when I was her age. You were incredible, she whispered. You think so, I asked. She nodded. And Mom hasn't stopped crying since you started speaking. I laughed softly. She used to cry because of me. Now it seems she cries for me. Hannah's face turned serious. You know, he saw the speech. My breath hitched. Father, she nodded. He called earlier. I didn't answer. But he watched. The wind lifted a loose strand of my hair. It brushed my cheek soft as a memory I didn't want to carry anymore. I hope someday, I said quietly, he realizes the world didn't end because I walked away. It didn't, Hannah whispered. It just got bigger without him. We stood side by side watching the limousines shimmer under the street lamps. Inside, applause rose again, another award, another speech. Life kept moving whether we fought it or feared it. That truth steadied me. I touched her arm. Go back inside. Enjoy the night. Aren't you coming in a minute? I said, smiling. She nodded and slipped back through the doors. Alone again, I lifted my gaze toward the hotel towers, stretching above the breakers like silent, glamorous witnesses to my rebirth. The Atlantic rolled and hissed beyond the courtyard wall, each wave carrying an echo of all the years I thought I had lost. But I hadn't lost anything. I had rebuilt everything, and I'd done it in a way no one could ever take away. I whispered to the Florida night. I finally arrived. The wind carried the words as if agreeing. For 12 years I believed revenge was an act loud, direct, pointed. But the truth was quieter than that. Revenge was simply showing up as the person they never believed you could be. Revenge was becoming undeniable. Revenge was letting the light show what darkness tried to erase. I breathed in the salt air and walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. And if you've been with me through this story, through the hurt, the rebuilding, the rising, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching, from what part of this journey spoke to you, and whether you've ever had to rebuild something that broke you. If this story moved you, tap like, share it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. I'd love for you to stay to grow with this channel and to keep walking with me through every story that reminds us what resilience truly looks like.